again, everybody, and welcome. This is one of those games that matters mightily in college football, especially since it is on the second Saturday in November. And these are elements that will be impacted by what happens here today. They include the Big Ten Conference Championship, the Rose Bowl, a possible invitation to an Alliance Bowl, the National Championship, and the Heisman Trophy. Now, if that doesn't whet your appetite, you're watching the wrong channel.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in Maize and Blue Review. Good afternoon, Michigan football. I'm Dennis Fithy, and I'm joined by Brandon Justice, who you can see. He's out on the road because he's been in Ann Arbor, and he's been talking with the coaches and seeing what the latest in Michigan's football and what's going on with the game coming up rapidly this Saturday. Brandon, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, too. I'm doing great. I just want to let everyone know at home that I definitely had a plan to go from Schembeckler Hall to a local establishment to get this a better setup. But here we are. I'm using my laptop and my personal hotspot on my phone, and we're making it work. So I'm doing good.
Well, like I told you, I like, when you're down there, just a wedge away from the stadium where it's happening. It just gives all of us, we're going to live vicariously through you and get, pumped up for this game. There's only so many things you can do. Like, people want this, can't wait, for Saturday, but we still have a couple days and some things to do. But, you can go on your phone and start trolling Penn State fans or Michigan State fans like you do every day. Or, you do watch and listen to podcasts like this to kind of, just get you excited about the game. What's the sense down there in Ann Arbor a couple minutes past 1 o'clock on this Wednesday?
A lot of confidence. I mean, this team certainly knows what it's capable of. And I think that finding their confidence last year kind of built a foundation that I think is going to carry over for the next couple of years. You talk about recruiting this year, and that presents a different conversation for the future. But for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I feel like this team and this program is going to continue building off of what they did last year. And whether or not they beat Ohio State again this year is a conversation for another day. But games like this, where Michigan is a top 10 team, how many times has Michigan been in a top 10 matchup and been a touchdown favorite, right? That hasn't happened often around these parts for the past decade plus, right? So it's kind of telling to what this program has been able to do over the past year, or the past calendar year especially, and how it's carried over into this season. So a lot of confidence, but a lot of preparation too. I mean, that's one thing about this program right now, and a lot of people can speculate, right? Like a few years ago, did Michigan talk the talk more than it walked the walk? In some cases, I think, yeah. But I think this program has really solidified itself as one that prides itself on its preparation and its scout and how it game plans. And we've seen a bit of a hiccup in that game plan like last week. But for the most part, the game planning has been tremendous from this team, and I think they have a lot of confidence in that. And they seem to believe they're going to win this game. Hard to find a college football team in America that doesn't think they're going to win the game they're about to play, though. So take that with a grain of salt.
We're talking with Brandon Justice, the senior editor of Maize and Blue Review. Of course, Michigan and Penn State. That's the headline. You heard Justice mention a little bit of the game plan. We're going to talk about that. We are leading off with just how we see this game, and Michigan being confident. They should be confident. They've been pointing to this in a lot of ways. You can say whatever you want about the non-conference slate or these other games and what the plan was, but this particular game, if they're planning on saving anything, or I wouldn't think, like, there's no time. Like, you can make a case they shouldn't have saved anything at Iowa or Indiana or anything else, but if they are, this would be the game where you're taking everybody off the leash and you're letting it fly.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the game where it's the biggest game of the year so far, right? I know it's a Harbaugh-ish quote, kind of a Harbaughism, but it's the biggest game this week.
It's true.
And so far, it's the biggest game this year, and they're treating it as such, as they should. And I mean, shoot, as far as like what this game entails, and I mean, this is the Big Ten East. I think like Michigan and Ohio State can't determine the Big Ten East if Michigan doesn't beat Penn State first, and there certainly is a pathway for that to happen, right? Like, Michigan could lose this game and still inevitably win the East. But as far as being in the driver's seat, as far as having confidence going into the rest of this season, this game is pivotal. It's their first. Everyone keeps saying we're at that part of the year where every week is, oh, it's a big test, or this is the big test, this is the big game. This is what we're going to learn about Michigan. But you learn as you go in college football, regardless of the schedule. I mean, if you look at some of the teams around the country, think about how high people were on Oklahoma 3 weeks ago and where they're at with Oklahoma now. So you learn about football teams every week in college football. It doesn't matter what the game is. You learn something typically. This game different. It's just it means more. There's an obvious parity and talent between these two teams. So I think we'll learn a lot this week.
Yeah, and you're spot on how rapidly things change, and this is not a time. Maybe I'm playing Keith Jackson at the beginning, so you can get a little sentimental, listening to one of the great voices of college football. Or if you start thinking about Saturday and all the pomp and circumstance that they have going on with the Phelps as the captain, with Carr getting the tunnel named after him, with the '97 team, with Charles Woodson going to get a special nod. I mean, all these different things that they have going. So, they're pulling out all the stops, game day wise to get it all out there and, make this a top 10 battle. But you start talking about the Big Ten East, and in just a couple of years, we're going to look back when it was the Big Ten East, because there's not going to be a Big Ten East anymore, I don't think. Right. And I'm looking forward to a 16-team playoff, and the not necessarily of having to play Ohio State or Penn State twice, but that's just going to be a reality. But what it does is maybe they'll have one last year, the Big Ten East, but the way that it's constructed right now, the games do. I mean, if you're playing a Big Ten East game, it means everything in college football. It doesn't matter how old you are. That's what used to be the argument. Like, I don't want a playoff because every game is a playoff and everything means every set. I mean, that was the line for a lot of, traditionalists that didn't want to go and it was going to ruin college football. But this year and next year, embrace it a little bit. You're a Michigan fan and you're right in the thick of things. I mean, this is it. And it was only 2 years ago where it looked like, you'd say, well, James Franklin, he did beat Ohio State, he did win the Big Ten. You're going to have to give him the nod over Jim Harbaugh. But we're sitting here, and I know people are talking about, wow, they extended James Franklin last year, and James Franklin's been 500. Like, he could be on the hot seat pretty quick. And Jim Harbaugh, it's just been 1 year, but obviously he did punch through last year in that confidence. And I just know how Michigan fans are feeling. 2 years ago, I had people just, their heads were down. They're just sad. And it looked pretty close. It could have been the end of Jim Harbaugh. But, now it's like, he's souped up, 100 feet tall, everybody feeling great. As good as they felt the day that he came in and said no to the NFL and came into Michigan, people are feeling as good about Harbaugh on the program. And they should, as they sit here getting ready for this game coming up on Saturday. And, Brandon liked that point so much that he froze up a little bit. Looks like that's what, hey, you don't like my point. That's okay, Brandon. That's good. It can happen. Like I said, he's got his personal hot spot. He was down at the news conferences today. He's talking with the different coaches, listening to everything that's going on, getting ready to write, for the next couple days, all the way up to kickoff, a little bit after noon coming up on Saturday. And he's been so nice to give us some of his time here. I don't mind just having Justice right there. If you're going to have a still photo, that's not a bad one. He looks locked in and focused on what's happening. So while Justice, maybe that'll be it for him. Well, or maybe he'll dial back in. Let's see what some of the people here are saying about this game and just how they're feeling on this Wednesday. Antoine says Michigan will be fine if Michigan puts the foot on the gas. He doesn't have to open it up, the Ferrari full blast, but he does have to push over the speed limit just a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, if Jim Harbaugh is just sitting back and, in his house and saying, I'm just playing it conservative because that's what I like to do, because I learned from Bo and I like fullbacks and I like running the football, and the fans and the media, they really don't understand about what's going on out there with, they want us to throw the ball every down and, all this kind of stuff. But I do think, and, we do bring Brandon Justice back. You paused at a great spot. You looked really good. Like, you kind of paused like this. You're like, very, thoughtful
Doesn't
look.
even know what's going on.
It was good. I could have just kept you there the whole time, but this is something that people are talking about, and it does go to our third point. But these are just guidelines. Antoine talking about what Michigan needs to do, and how, what would be their best course of action to win this game, and he's saying putting his foot on the gas. Here's one thing that I know that Michigan watches all teams, but Michigan is going to watch a lot of film. Part of that is a self-scout. They're watching themselves, and they have independent coaches and advisors watching to self-scout. So if I know that they run the ball all the time out of the pistol every single time, and you got fans on the Maize and Blue Review on the den saying, I can tell where they're going to do. They're telegraphing exactly what's going to happen. They know that they're doing that. Now, are they going to continue to do that and say, I don't care if the defense, or are they setting something up via the film and getting ready to spring it? I feel like it has to be a little bit of the latter there, because there's no way that they would just say, well, everybody's saying that we run out of the pistol, so when we go to the pistol, we're just going to continue doing it.
Yeah, I think you have to expect to see some tendency breakers in a game like this, on a big scale too. I mean, Michigan has, like you said, Dennis, put a lot of things on tape. And today we talked to Sharon Moore, co-offensive coordinator. I just got out of the press conference talking to him, and he talked about Michigan's self-scout, and he talked about he said something that really stuck with me, and he said game planning and scripting, and you have to tell a story as a play caller, is what he said. And I think that resonates with what's going on right now, and that Michigan has sort of, in some aspects, given away what they're going to do because of their tendencies. So I expect a game like this to be a tendency breaker. I think they're telling a story that's longer than one game. I think they're trying to tell multiple stories each week to build up to the next game and the next game. And it's not so much looking ahead. It's just understanding, okay, this will work against Indiana. This will work against Iowa. Let's do that. Let's put that on tape. And then we can call back to it against whomever. And in this case, it's Penn State. So I think you see some tendency breakers. I think you see some pistol play action. I just don't have it in me to sit here and say that Matt Weiss and Sharon Moore, the co-offensive coordinators, co-play callers for Michigan and their offense, it would be absolutely bonkers to me if they didn't know what they have in J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards in the play action game, and what that can do for their passing offense and their offense as a whole. They're so balanced, as an offense. It's probably the most balanced offense in the country. Maybe Ohio State and Ohio State, Bama are obviously there, but their offense is far more balanced than Georgia, far more. And sometimes balance doesn't equal success. Some teams just need to pass the ball more and they're going to score more. Some teams just need to run the ball more and they're going to score more. They can't pass the ball as well. In Michigan's case, they can do both extremely well, making them extremely dangerous in both aspects of the game, which makes each team, when they're scouting them, they can't sell out on one or the other. We saw Indiana kind of sell out on one, right? And then we saw what JJ did when they adjusted to that at halftime. After JJ McCarthy threw that interception in the end zone, he was 10 of 10, 2 touchdowns. So it's clear that this team has the makeup, talent-wise, personnel-wise, to go do exactly what it needs to do to beat a team like Penn State. You get to the Ohio State conversation, it's a little bit different, but their balance is going to carry them a long way. And I have a hard time believing that, despite what we've seen on tape so far being a bit discouraging as far as tendency goes and habitual things that we continue to see, I'm just one to believe, especially based on that quote from Sharon Moore about being a storyteller. I think that these guys, we know how smart these two are, right? We know how smart Matt Weiss is. We know how integral he was to last year's offensive, I guess I wouldn't say overhaul, but just offensive evolution would be my best way of putting it, because there's still a lot of characteristics that are foundational from a Jim Harbaugh offense, even dating back to 2015. But there's just so many verticals that we just haven't seen over these past couple of years that came in last year with Matt Weiss. So I just have a hard time believing these two, Weiss and Moore, don't draw up something that is right in front of them. We can all see it, right? And I wonder if Penn State, I would imagine they're countering or they're preparing for some counters for Michigan. They're preparing for some broken tendencies. But that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, that's football is kind of imitates war sometimes.
Yeah, and another beauty of it is that we can all look at it and say what we want or what we expect, and then we'll just see how it plays out. But this particular game, as I look at it, I've watched JJ McCarthy just like everyone else, and I've heard people say, well, they're making him a game manager, and they're slowly giving him a little bit each and every game. I do believe in that. I think he's the difference in this game. As I've looked at it, I'm feeling it. Talking about matching everything up. I know it's Sean Clifford. I've watched him enough to know what kind of player that he is. I know they have their own hot shot backup quarterback that could play into things coming up on Saturday as well. But this is all pointing to me towards this is JJ McCarthy's game. Sure, I think Penn State knows that they're going to try to run the ball. Penn State's going to be trying to run the ball. So. The quarterback and the playmaking ability. It doesn't have to be in the vertical passing game. It can be running for first downs. I think JJ, this is the game that whether he's unleashed or plays his best game, I think all those things are possible. I think he's the difference. I think if Michigan can stop Penn State's run, put it on Sean Clifford, and on the other side, if they can go to JJ and all the things, whether he's rolling right, man, he's exceptional. He's rolling right. Man, if they're doing an RPO and he takes off, it seems like he's great running to the left. Hit a couple vertical passes, all of those things. I think this being at home, stopping the run, and having J.J. McCarthy is going to be the difference in this game.
See, I think that here's where the game started to kind of take a narrative for me. If you look at the PFF grades for Penn State, and I know PFF can be relative sometimes in how it grades, but you can still have some general takeaways from the numbers here. Penn State's a terrible, terrible tackling team, according to PFF. I mean, they have a tackling grade of 48.7. I don't know where that ranks in the country. I can definitely draw that up for our preview piece that comes out on Thursday, Eyes on the Enemy. But as far as I appreciate it, as far as looking at the defensive grades, a 48.7 tackling grade, an 83.5 coverage grade, and an 86.9 pass rush grade. So that's Penn State's defense. What that tells me is Michigan is going to find advantages in blitz counters and finding space because Penn State cannot tackle well, but it does rush the passer well, and it does play really well in coverage. So while Michigan certainly has the personnel and the capability to drop back and pass, and J.J. McCarthy can throw these bombs that we know, and he has the arm talent that he has, I'm just one to believe that they're going to do a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of spacing, a lot of easy, quick stuff, because Michigan just lost Trente Jones, and I know that they have the utmost confidence in Carson Barnhart, the replacement for him, who's kind of been the routine sixth starter for this offense the past 2 years. And Sharon Moore just mentioned that Barnhart, who was suffering an injury throughout the year, is 100% healthy going into this week, so they're encouraged by that. But Michigan's pass block, it's 32nd in the country, which is good. It's not stellar, though. It hasn't been as good as what we thought it was going to be. The run block is right around 72.2, which is good in comparison to the rest of the country. But I think there's a clear advantage here for Michigan. There's a clear pathway, I think, to success here for Michigan. And it's doing what they did against UConn. We saw how well they were able to execute it. Granted, it's Connecticut. Like, I understand you can't compare the Huskies to the Nittany Lions. I understand it. But the game plans, I think, should be similar. And I thought they were going to be similar when Michigan played, I believe it, I had the scout down. I think it was Maryland. Yeah, I believe it was Maryland, where I thought Michigan was going to roll out some UConn-esque stuff. And if you go back and watch the Maryland tape, Michigan's offensive struggles, they were trying to do too much vertically instead of taking the stuff underneath and on the outside that Maryland was giving them. So Penn State's inability to tackle and its ability to cover the pass downfield and to get to the passer tells me that Michigan's best option here offensively is splits counter spacing stuff, which isn't sexy, but it pushes the ball. It's methodical. They'll be able to run the ball. They'll be able to do some RPO pulls where they're going to the outside borders. They can go underneath on some crosses. We've seen how successful Michigan's been on the crossing routes. We saw it several times last week, especially on Cornelius Johnson's touchdown. But even on the one where Michigan had their backs to the end zone and Cornelius Johnson dropped it, I was sitting in the press box, and that's a touchdown, guys. That's 6 if he catches that about 95 yards, and all that was a cross. So yeah, I think that's Michigan's offensive success blueprint for this game is to take advantage of the fact that Penn State can't tackle well, not even remotely well, according to PFF. And then, their ability to cover the pass and get to the passer just tells me dropping back and taking 3 to 4 to 5 seconds is a dangerous game, especially because how many times has McCarthy fumbled this year? We're right around 6. He hasn't lost one yet, but he's getting pretty close.
Yeah, well, those are some of the takeaways. Like I watched that whole Auburn game a couple weeks ago, and Penn State looked really good in that game. They really ran the ball well, but they got 4 turnovers. So you get 4 turnovers, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And those were 4 turnovers actually that they recovered. Whether that was interception or jump at it, that's a big help. And Penn State, sure, they got the help. And Auburn's not all that good, as it turns out. But they also, it's like in those non-conference games for Michigan, those teams weren't any good either. But JJ looked really good. You don't take it away from him. Another number or aspect that jumped out to me looking at Penn State, they do really good with red zone defense. So, being able to score down there, these are things that you say in big games, like special teams will be big. The kicking game's obviously going to be big. You don't turn the ball over, all those kind of things. Scoring in the red zone, if we're looking at the numbers and if that means anything, with Penn State having gaudy numbers with their red zone defense, Michigan getting it down there. And we saw J.J. McCarthy last week, man, he was targeting A.J. Henning. He had Ronnie Bell one time in the end zone. He threw an interception down there in the red zone. Being able to – I imagine that they've worked a lot on that red zone offense this week.
Yeah, Michigan has to work on completing drives, something that they take a lot of pride in, right? But last week was kind of not so much the exposure of what happens when you don't, but it certainly gave them a hint of what happens when you don't finish drives. Right, the blocked field goal, right? Indiana blocked Jake Moody's field goal. J.J. McCarthy forced a throw into a window that was too tough to go through and ended a drive that looked like it was going to end in points. So when McCarthy took over this job, his red zone efficiency was a marvel, and it still really is. But last week kind of gave us an idea of where Michigan can put itself positionally in a game when it can't complete those drives. Michigan is not untouchable, and sometimes it plays as if it is. And with the blocked field goal last week and the interception in the red zone last week against a team that's far inferior to Penn State, it kind of goes to show, all right, this is how important it is for us to finish these drives. And there's not a football coach in America who doesn't understand that. Nobody is going around saying, we can get away with not finishing a drive. Everybody knows you need to finish drives. The name of the game is scoring points. Scoring the most you can each drive is best. Points per possession. We talked about that with Coach Harbaugh before the season. He said that was the biggest metric in measuring stick between McCarthy and McNamara before the season during the QB battle. So points per possession is a massive metric for this team. They take a lot of pride in it, but they did not execute it last week. They did not execute it well last week in certain parts of the game where they really needed to against a defense that's real bad. Now, Indiana played inspired. There's no doubt about that. They're at home. Michigan on a back-to-back road leg. There's a lot of variables, right? At home, where they're comfortable, they've seemed to, again, Maryland is a good team, so I'm gonna take stock in that game. When they're at home, they typically finish drives better than when they're on the road, as far as we've seen these past 2 weeks. But it's something that they take pride in, and it's something that really has become a contingency for this team to win ball games, is by finishing those drives with points, whether it's 3 or 7, something they did so well until last week. We'll see if it rolls over into this week, but it's certainly something that has to be done for them.
Yeah, being at home is definitely nice, and they are rolling out the maize and blue carpet for the 97 team and everything else. Maize out. It's going to be awesome that way. It's going to be a great atmosphere. Let's have you look at some of the feedback, and if anything jumps out to you. You ready for that, Brandon? AJ. He will throw a message down when Justice is on. He says, if we notice Michigan didn't start rolling until Jim took the parking boot off of JJ and just let him operate, which is throwing the ball and mixing in the run, which makes Michigan unpredictable against Indiana. You think that's right? The Jim is taking the training wheels off or the parking boot of JJ now in the second half?
I don't know if I would say Michigan's necessarily taking a training boot off of Michigan. I think that or a training, whatever you want to call it, training wheels or parking boot, whatever it may be. But I certainly think Michigan understands that J.J. McCarthy is mistake prone. He likes to make things happen. He likes to be a playmaker, and he is, and he will be, and he's probably going to be one for a long time. But Michigan understands in a game like this. What did you just mention a couple of minutes ago, Dennis? You said the turnovers were the difference for Penn State against Auburn. Well, go watch the Penn State and Northwestern game. There was 5 turnovers for Northwestern in that game. I mean, granted, Penn State turned the ball over a couple of times themselves too, but that was a difference in that game. That was a touchdown game, right? Penn State might, monsoon for sure, but to turn the ball over, to force 5 turnovers and only win by a touchdown against a team that's really bad in Northwestern really says a lot about, I guess, what you can do on the field, in my opinion, against a team like Michigan. Now, granted, the weather certainly played a factor, but if Penn State is a run-first team, if they're going to find the most success running the ball, why were they held back in a game where running is the whole – it's a rainy day, right? A rainy day in football is you're going to pound the ball. So if Penn State's identity is to pound the ball with these talented backs they have in the offensive line they believe they have, then why didn't it work against Northwestern? And I have a hard time believing it's gonna translate against Michigan in fair weather, because Michigan is so much better than Northwestern defensively. So I have concerns there. I think that as far as taking the training wheels off of J.J. McCarthy, though, I just think it's one of those things where Michigan doesn't want to put itself in a spot where it's losing the game. If they're going to lose the game, they want to get beat clean. They don't want to beat themselves. They understand how important this team is and how one slip-up can affect their whole season. You think about butterfly effects. If J.J. McCarthy fumbles a ball inside the 20-yard line after getting hit, and Penn State jumps out to a 7-0 lead, or if that happens late and it tilts, that's a season tilter, right? Michigan loses this game at home, Mays out against Penn State, first top 10 matchup, questions start to arise. And the difference in a win and a loss often are turnovers. So it's not so much that Michigan doesn't want to take the training wheels off of J.J. McCarthy. Michigan wants to win ball games, and it understands that jumping out to leads, they can rely on their defense to secure that lead and keep that lead, and then they can go be methodical on offense. That's always been their identity, is to be methodical, right? Now, there's going to be certain spots in a game where Michigan's going to take shots. Look, if J.J. McCarthy hits 2, maybe 3 of his deep throws over the past 4 weeks, we're having a way different conversation about Michigan's offense. Michigan has put him in a position to be a gunslinger. He has not been it. He has thrown the ball 6 feet past, the outswung arms of receivers consistently the last 3 weeks on deep routes. It hasn't happened yet. Does he have the arm talent? Yeah. Is he coming up short? No, the balls aren't underthrown. They're there. They're just too deep. So the timing, he said that his arm strength, and he had just now getting his arm strength back. He's getting used to having that much strength back. Yada, yada, yada. I understand all that. The fact of the matter is Michigan has allowed JJ to go do that. He hasn't executed on the deep balls. And as far as putting him in turnover-prone situations, it's best for business that they don't. Cade McNamara was the safest man on the block. J.J. McCarthy will push more needles. Who's a better player? I think we obviously know that now. I just think that Michigan's game planning is to not beat themselves. And it's not playing fear either, but, it's very important to, like J.J. McCarthy said a few weeks ago, protect the ball because the ball is the program.
You said earlier you were talking to Sharon Moore, and you mentioned Carson Barnhart is the 100% taking over for Trente Jones over there at right tackle. Any other kind of nuggets when it comes down to potentially people that could be in this game, or guys that are closer to 100% than whatever they were before? I don't know, somebody like Roman Wilson or anything like that?
We haven't heard anything. Michigan just refuses to give any updates on injuries, and I don't. Maybe that's like a constant.
I know it's a tough one for you.
Maybe that's a constant throughout college football, every program. I'm not sure. I'm not one to say. But we haven't had any updates on Roman Wilson. We have no clue if he's playing or not. Of course, you can go to the Den. I think we've got some hints on there and what we're hearing at the Den. Me personally, got nothing from the coaches today, but we've heard some positive things in certain areas. But as far as Roman Wilson, not sure. I would imagine so. His injury didn't seem serious. The speculation is that it was off the hit against Iowa, where it looked like a targeting from the Iowa player.
Could have been,
but I think should have been targeting, right? I think holding out Roman Wilson last week, I don't think it's a precautionary. I think he needed to sit that game out. You think about how many things are going on in football right now surrounding head injuries, and just I think Michigan's taking the utmost careful. They're being as careful as they can about that injury and as sensitive as they can about that injury. if it is a concussion. But again, we've got nothing on it. We still don't know anything. The coaches have not told us anything. Now, of course, we have some sourced info and all of that. But as far as the coaches, still nothing shared publicly on who's in and who's out. Nittany Green is still, we haven't seen him all year. We were under the impression that was only going to be a 1 or 2 week thing. Aggravated it in practice early on in the season. So, and Michigan desperately needs some help in pass coverage with the linebacking core, but they don't have Nittany Green. It doesn't sound like he's going to play this week either, as far as I know. Past that, we saw RJ Moten take a lot less snaps last week, which has caused some speculation as to whether he just didn't play as much because there's 3 safeties and Makari Page has risen, or if it's because he was a bit banged up himself too. So we'll see. RJ Moten, in my opinion, is the best safety on this team of the 3. But we'll see, right? As far as any other injuries go, I mean, Carson Barnhart, like you said, back to 100%. Still waiting to see on Roman Wilson. Still no word on Eric All. Sounds like that's going to be a long-term thing, though, as far as we know. But yeah, publicly still nothing, which is just par for the course. And at this point, you just got to understand it, I suppose.
Well, for my own research, I can tell you that it appears that Roman Wilson has been kind of active on TikTok this week. So I think that might.
Oh, that's good.
That's not bad, to have him out there. I don't know. It sounds like a pretty good argument. Like I would think that Rod Moore out of the 3 safeties would be the best. But then, yesterday I was talking with a former player, and he just, kept raving about Makari Page. He's like, before the year and off, nobody was talking about Makari Page. And look at him now. Look at how well he's played. The guy just kept telling me about how Page and how Seven's flying all over the place. And I was like, hey, he's out there. Yeah, but I couldn't believe how I don't know. He's just pretty excited about him. So they got it's a good argument, and they got 3 pretty good safeties, which is a good thing. All right, let's get some more feedback here. Brandon's got to write all the way up till noon on Saturday. We can't keep him all day. Here's the captain who says he doesn't think the offense this game is going to go back to looking familiar scheme-wise at all. Just because of how we shifted up gears last year twice. Wisconsin went first to second gear. Maryland, Ohio State went from second to third. Shifting the gears up. That's kind of what we've been talking about. Taking the training wheels off. No tendencies or flipping tendencies. All those kind of things. That's what it's about here. That's what we're feeling.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see tendency breakers this weekend. Absolutely, and I think that you put it in the captain, we're going to call him that. You put it in a way that was a bit broad. I don't necessarily think Michigan is like switching gears based on the game. I think Michigan just has a game plan for each opponent. And naturally, when you're playing an opponent that's close to as good as you or maybe even better than you, in that case, sure, they're going to turn it up a gear, quote unquote. But to me, it's just that's tendency breakers, right? It's doing things differently. It's not necessarily opening things up. It's just breaking your tendencies. And we're at that point of the year where Michigan's put 6 games on tape, and they feel good about what they've done behind closed doors. And now it's ready to kind of roll out those things out they haven't necessarily rolled out yet. So, yeah, I mean, you could say putting it into a different gear, but to me, it's just, hey, it's Penn State week. This is the first top 10 game of the week. We this is a balls to the wall type of week. This is a week where we might have to open. We have to turn the page a lot in the playbook. Obviously in a perfect world, they don't have to. But again, like I see if Michigan is scouting the way that it looks like this game is offering it to scout, they're going to put a lot of things in space. They're going to do a lot of blitz counters, a lot of RPOs, a lot of JJ with his legs and his escapability, and I think that's what we see. So yeah, you could say turning it up a gear, and I think Wisconsin is a good reference point because they did a lot of things last year against Wisconsin we hadn't seen, namely the flea flicker. And then, not to mention the kitchen sink they pulled out against Ohio State and how they bombed Maryland, which I think had a lot more to do with how bad Maryland's defense was than it did Michigan's, switching of gears necessarily. So yeah, I think for sure you'll see some tendency breakers, but I think that's a byproduct of the stage, and it's a byproduct of how this team typically goes about its business from week to week and how they game plan specifically for the opponent. And they feel like the balance they have in the pass and the run game and the personnel they have coupled with it gives them the opportunity to do a lot of things most teams can't do. A lot of people have to understand Michigan's offense is 6th in the country according to PFF. Its defense is 5th, right? And its special teams is 9th. There's no other team. I mean, I can't guarantee that because I think Alabama or Ohio State, but no team behind Michigan can claim 3 of those departments in the top 10. So Michigan's awfully balanced. Not sexy all the time, but it's awfully balanced and it's awfully smart and it's awfully the word I'm looking for is not coming out of my mouth. Strategical would be the best thing I come up with, but it's really, to me, they're very advantageous in their self scout and what they see on tape and how they can break those tendencies. In my opinion, will be the X factor in this game.
Well, you're spitting it, and you can come up with all the Pro Football Focus numbers. I know you dive into all of that, and you take the analytical approach, and you see what the experts in Vegas are doing for the game and all of that. But I'm just going to boil it down to maybe a phrase you used a couple minutes ago. This is a balls to the wall game for Michigan, and that's it. And the thing is, if you want to get to the college football playoff, if you want to get to Indianapolis, if you want to make that Ohio State game mean something, if you want to really, if you're a Michigan fan, argue about getting dropped in the polls and a team that's played teams in the top 25 and you're going to cry about it and all that, you win this kind of game and then you can start saying, hey, now we've got something to go on in this to get the second half going. This that you've had hurdles, but Michigan's been a double-digit favorite in all these games. Now it's coming down. The second half is way different. You want to get to November with a chance to play for everything. You got to get through Penn State coming up on Saturday. This is a game that you want to be at. If you're a Michigan fan, man, holding tickets for this one. If you're in the press, you're going up to cover this one. This is why you got into the business. This is why you go to the games. Everything's lining up for it to be a great Saturday. So I would just have everybody sit tight, enjoy it. And you have any final thoughts on a Wednesday midweek? Because now, once we get to tomorrow, people are on the edge of their seat and ready. So you got to kind of push them towards the back half of this weekend. Justice, what can you tell everybody in your final thoughts on this game?
I think Michigan's defense is going to give Penn State's offense a lot of trouble. Penn State's offense is 55th in pass, 57th in pass block, 49th in pass routes, and their run block is only a 58.9 grade. And Michigan, as a comparison, it would be a 72.2 grade, which is a really big margin. So I think, offensively, Penn State just doesn't do enough to counter what Michigan has defensively. I think Michigan's defensive line, especially its edge rush and what they're able to do with the twists and stunts that Mike Ellison, the defensive line coach, has drawn up against teams throughout the season. I think it's going to give Penn State a lot of problems. Look, Sal Wormley, the starting guard for Penn State, has a 34.7 pass block grade, and that's not the worst of their starters. The worst is his partner in crime, Landon Tengwall, the other guard, who has a 26.2 pass block grade. Drew Scruggs, the center, and Fashanu, the other tackle, whose first name I'm not even going to attempt to name, they're both above an 86 pass block. So you got two good pass blockers. But here's the other side of it, and I think this is your X factor. On the right-hand side of the tackle, on the right-hand side of the line, the offensive tackle there is Caden Wallace, who just replaced Bryce Effner a couple of weeks ago. Each of their pass block grades are below 46. They don't have any pass blocking on the right side. Michigan's going to use the absolute hell out of the Avioki, I think, in this game to go in there and disrupt. The same goes for Mike Morris. Don't see a way that Penn State can protect Sean Clifford. Sean Clifford's been beat up and hit so many times in his career, and it's typically come against Michigan more so than any other team. And I think that trend continues. Jim Harbaugh has so much success against Penn State at home. 2020, he lost here. I don't like to think about that season as a real one, considering it was a COVID year, but we can sit here and say that happened. But every year before that, Michigan's really taken Penn State to pound town at home. And I think this is a year where it might not happen that way. This could be, I think it will be a marginal game. It will be a 7 to 10 point game. But Michigan's pressure defensively is the game breaker here. There's no protection for Clifford that can counter what Michigan does with its pressures defensively and its rushes and stunts and twists. It's just too much for Penn State, especially with Michigan at home, having to roll out with a crazy crowd. It's just hard to see any offensive success for Penn State unless they really break a lot of tendencies and their pass blockers really step up against the best defensive line they face this season.
You know what it tells me?
What's that?
Party at the quarterback. Party at Sean Clifford's area, the spot that he's going to be throwing the ball. Don't rough him. Don't celebrate too much unless it's going to be with your teammates, and get him off the field. You got everybody fired up, Justice. A great job. You got 100th. You get the opponent that the enemy story that I always take care of. I found some nice nuggets in there last week that you worked in with all the analytical approach and what all the people from the desert were saying. I look forward to that. You have anything else that you're going to be putting up print wise, Maize and Blue review that people can check out leading up to Saturday at noon?
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing a betting preview and just some analysis. I just posted a spread analysis early this morning, about 5 in the morning. Don't worry, I was not awake at 5. I scheduled it for 5. But we did a spread analysis this morning. So if anyone's interested in that, you can head over to the site now and go read it. On top of that, later this week, and this is my point here, Vegas, you've mentioned it a couple of times. The game opened, and this is really like earmuffs if you're looking for some positivity, because it's still I'm just gonna break it down because I like to ramble, you know me. Yeah, so the line opened at 8.5 or 7.5, went down to 7, and it's kind of been frozen at 7. It's tucked down to 6.5, it's gone back out to 7, it's tucked down to 6.5, but really it's stayed 90% at 7. And after Sharps came in and bet the 8.5 point open down to 7, that tells me a lot of people liked Penn State. Well, Penn State at the time of speaking is at 72% of the money. Despite being at 72% of the money for 3 days, that line has not gone from 7 to 6.5 in the consensus. It's stayed at 7. If that line stays at 7, you think about, I'm going to reference a game from last week. TCU and Kansas had a very similar draw, and it pushed at 7 and it closed at 7. I think if this line, the key number here, guys, if you're not familiar with Vegas, the key number is 6.5. If this line goes down to 6.5 and continues to go down, then I start to get a little bit worried, because that's telling me that the smart and the pro bettors really like Penn State and really like what they're going to do against Michigan. Doesn't mean they're going to win outright, but they think it's going to be a less than touchdown difference in this game. Sagarin, which is a power rating system published by USA Today every day, Bill Sagarin started it forever ago. It has Michigan in its ratings as a 6.5 point favorite. And it's not even a decimal point off. It is quite literally 6.51. That's the difference between these two teams when adding in the home. Now, every single time they're at home, the power rating adds 2.10. So Michigan is a 4.5 point better team than Penn State by the power ratings. After you add in their home field advantage, they're 6.5 point favorites. Kind of ironic that Vegas is sticking around that 6 to 5 to 7 mark. So what we really have to pay attention to, and what you're going to read on the site around Friday, is where are we at on Friday? Is Michigan below 6.5? Is Michigan above 7? If they're above 7, Michigan is going to win this game, according to Vegas. If they're below 6.5, danger zone. Pro bettors are wrong. Vegas is wrong. We've been wrong. Everyone's been wrong before. It's not an absolute, but it's just a sign and something to look for, and something that is a pattern. Vegas typically has a good idea of what's going to happen in games. That's why so many people lose their money doing it. So that's where I'm at betting-wise, and you can be sure to check that out on Friday, because we're going to have a much clearer view of what goes on there.
You know, you've got me so many things going different ways. I just feel here in close that the lucky number 7, like, this is the 7th game of the season. The odds, Michigan by 7. They are honoring the 97 team, down there. We were talking earlier, and we talked about the safety position. Makari Page wears number 7.
7.
That's it. I liked it. Justice, great job. We knew that, we knew that you weren't getting up before 7 o'clock in the morning. So we knew you. I was thinking you may have stayed up till 5, but I wasn't thinking you got up, at 5 o'clock in the morning. Great job. Can't wait to read all of your stuff and then talk with you on Sharpening the Edge coming up on Friday afternoon. Take care. Can't wait to see you then.
Can't wait. I'll talk to you then. You guys take care.
Thanks, everybody, for watching.